the latest on the economy, Trump's regulatory agenda, and the latest healthcare impulses. Joining us to discuss all this, AAF President Douglas Holtz-Eakin, Director of Regulatory Policy Dan Goldbeck, and Director of Healthcare Policy Michael Baker. So we've got a full show today, so let's jump right into it. Doug, thanks for joining us. What's been on your mind recently?
Well, as of this instant, the Supreme Court has struck down the President's International Economic Emergency Act powers and gotten rid of those tariffs. More to come on that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, that's an earthquake in the economic policy of the administration. What was on my mind just a second before that, and what had irritated me to no end, was National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett going after 4 staffers at the New York Fed over a research paper they wrote on who really pays the tariffs.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a daily dish about this, and he came across as angry because I am.
Yeah.
And I'm angry at several levels. Number one, it's a very misleading economic argument, and there's one really improbable outcome where what he says is true, and the rest, it's not true. And he's a PhD economist who I've known for almost 3 decades now, and I have over 3 decades.
Yeah.
So I'm upset with that. That's just the beginning. The piece on top of it is, it is not okay for someone sitting in a White House perch to go after the staff of another organization. Like, absolutely not okay. So a huge violation in my view. And it is really not okay to impugn their integrity in the process, to accuse them of a partisan hit job when all they're doing is their research work, which is their job.
Yeah.
So it upsets me on many levels.
Yeah.
And it should be beneath him.
It was really shocking, and I had to, when I first saw the clip come across my social media, I was like, is this an AI video? Like, I mean, what? It just didn't make sense to me for, like you said, a White House official going after somebody doing their job. But anyways, they're not the only, the New York Fed is not the only independent organization out there that has come to this same conclusion.
Everybody who looks at the question comes to something very close to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And so, stop shooting the messenger and start accepting the results. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the Supreme Court just made it all moot because they said these got to go.
Right.
So next steps on that are going to be one of the most important things. And they have said they have a plan B. I don't know if they really do.
Right.
They do have authorities that haven't been questioned, so they can use those authorities. But that has to be determined.
Right. So Jacob's about to post a paper any second now about this.
Yep.
We'll of course include it in the links for everyone to look at.
Good.
It's there's going to be a lot of questions to go from here. I mean, what happened? Right before we came on, Brian, one of our comms staffers, said that they left open the question of refunds. So that's obviously still going to be litigated.
The business community expects refunds.
Yeah.
Some people have already sued to get their money back.
Right.
So the administration has to make a decision on that, not in a week or a month, but soon. Yeah. So that they at least can give some guidance as to how this is going to happen.
Right.
When it's going to happen, things like that.
So I assume that in the next podcast we'll have Jacob on to break this all down because again,
because you don't want me to do it.
We're literally probably 20 minutes into the decision. Yeah. So at this point, so there's so many questions, lots to still be parsed out.
More to come on that front.
More to come on that front. All right, let's turn to the economy.
Again, big news, hot off the presses. We got the first reading on fourth quarter GDP, which came in at a shockingly low 1.4% growth rate. Now, remember that people who have no lives, namely me, follow the evolution of the outlook for the economy by looking at the GDP Now estimate at the Atlanta Fed, which takes real-time data and sort of says, okay, given what we know, this is what the quarter is going to look like. And they had numbers that were at 4.7% at one point, and they closed the books at 3%. This is really much, much lower. Now, caveats, as always. The special factor in here is the government shutdown. There's a huge decline in federal spending in these data. It looks like it accounts for 1.1 percentage points. So a number adjusted for the shutdown is something closer to 2.5. But that's a far cry from 4.4, where we were in the third quarter, and which administration officials were saying was that's where we're going to be
The
as
new
far as the eye
norm.
could see. No. Again, I'm not shocked because for the second quarter in a row, we saw zero. Did I say zero? Growth in real disposable income.
Yeah.
So how do you power the household sector if incomes aren't growing? Well, the household sector held on largely on services. Purchases of goods declined, especially durable goods, way down.
Yeah.
And so you got a household sector that's not as strong as you might like. Pretty strong investment sector. That's still true in the business sectors, doing some pretty big capital investment. But those are the strengths. Exports fell,
Yeah.
and imports, the trade component was worse than had been expected. So it's a report that no one should be happy about. I mean, it's not a strong report. And the last check on the box, it comes with a reading on personal consumption expenditures price indexes, so the Fed's preferred inflation measure.
Right.
This is closing the books on December, so we don't have any 2026 data yet. But for the year, we have PCE inflation at 2.8% and core at 3.0%.
Yeah.
And last December, core PCE inflation was, ding, 3%.
Yeah.
So no progress during 2025. The Fed can't be happy about that.
Right.
So
Yeah. So speaking of the Fed, I mean, it's hard to talk about the economy without talking about the Fed these days. Like you just said, we're at a 3% number, no change from a year. So they're still 1% above their 2% rate, and we had less job growth than we thought we did last year. So what is this?
we had terrible job growth.
Right.
I mean,
the revised numbers are bad, and
outside of 58,000 health and education jobs, it's a negative number. It's negative 15. I mean, it's just this is a labor market that's not creating jobs.
Yeah. So how does the Fed deal with all this?
The minutes were revealing. Right? We got the minutes from the most recent FOMC meeting. There were people talking about rate increases.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a different world than the White House resides in, and if you've got to bridge that divide, good luck. So I think realistically, the Powell Fed, which will last till May when he steps down as chair, is on hold.
Yeah.
I don't see them doing anything. The Warsh Fed, he's trying to make the case that we have this enormous productivity boom that we can count on that will allow greater rate cuts. That seems like less than a sure bet, to put it gently. And so he's going to have to somehow convince the FOMC, and I'd be surprised if he can right away.
Yeah, outside of, like you said, healthcare and education for jobs, and then investment seems to just be coming from the AI boom.
Big top line numbers, real uneven underneath.
Right.
Sort of in any dimension you want to cut it. I worry about the small business, large business piece of this.
Interesting.
Big businesses doing way better than the small business sector.
Gotcha. Well, lots more to come on the economy as well, so we'll have to stay tuned in 2026.
Never dull.
Doug, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Dan, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's been a while, but how have you been?
Doing all right. Yeah.
Obviously, you've been tracking a lot of the what's been going on with the administration's regulatory agenda, and it was big news up until about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
About one of the things they did, which we'll get to in a second. But what? It does seem like the deregulatory agenda is picking up, the Trump administration's agenda. Where does it stand right now?
So I think when we last talked, back last year, we were still kind of getting the bearings of where this was headed. In the 13 months or so now of Trump 2.0, under the executive order 14192 that implements the regulatory budget, they've finalized roughly $150 billion in terms of cost savings or deregulatory savings that they claim. That was through last week, and we actually had a pretty significant new one drop this past week with the endangerment finding, and that's going to drastically inflate that number significantly.
Yeah, so up until about 20 minutes ago, that was the big news of the last, week or so. So yes, the so-called endangerment finding. First, what is this? And second, what does this change from a regulatory perspective?
Sure. So the endangerment finding is actually a finding from back in 2009 under the Obama administration that stems from the Supreme Court case, Massachusetts versus EPA, that essentially grants EPA the power to regulate greenhouse gases. And so now the Trump administration is going in and repealing the endangerment finding, which would essentially repeal the underlying basis for EPA regulating greenhouse gases. What this means practically in the near term, it's complicated. There's going to be all sorts of legal machinations going forward with this. But in terms of the rulemaking that was produced this past week, basically it cancels out the tailpipe emissions rules that were put forward under the Biden administration the past couple years. There will be some other ramifications for other EPA rules, but those will need to go through their own legal process, essentially. But basically, this rule, as a part of repealing the endangerment finding, repeals these tailpipe rules, and the current EPA estimates that you'll be savings in the neighborhood of 1.1 trillion.
Wow.
At least for our purposes of recording for Reg Rodeo. There's a couple different estimates they include within the analysis. It's all very fun and complicated, but for our purposes, the price tag is 1.1 in estimated cost reductions. But again, the actual practical impact of this in the very near term is going to be kind of dicey, because you're going to need to get through the courts and probably all the way back to the Supreme Court.
So there's a lot of like questions still around. I mean, legal, as it seems like these days, anytime that there's regulatory actions of this magnitude, there's going to be a legal action. There's going to be a court case that goes through it. So it's part of the normal process at this point.
And it's sort of a microcosm of where we're at in terms of the swings that we're seeing across administrations on the regulatory side. You know, you had at the very end of Biden's term, he had a grand total of 1.8 trillion in total costs that we recorded in Reg Rodeo. And now you have, you know, the Trump administration going the other direction, now reaching the, you know, $1 trillion threshold, at least on paper. And so it just, I think it illustrates just how much of an impact the regulatory policy side of things has, and it keeps flipping back and forth to these dramatic peaks and valleys. Yeah,
I mean, I remember sitting here with you, with Doug, and talking about how astonishing it was under the Biden administration about how big of a regulatory number is, and now we seem to swing all the way back. And again, it's part of this, like, you know, depending on who's in the White House and who's in charge, are we going to get these large numbers on either side?
And I think even beyond just the individual estimates for these rules, I think it's important to note that, you know, for things like vehicle manufacturing, they're making the companies are making decisions years, if not decades in advance, and so it presents an interesting conundrum for them in terms of every 4 years we're going one way or the other.
Yeah,
that has to have some costs that shows up in terms of how they have to plan out their investment procedures.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine the uncertainty for the business community every 4 years to have to change course on a 10-year plan. I mean, that just doesn't make much business sense. All right, so let's look ahead. What else can we expect this year from the administration on the broader deregulatory efforts?
Sure. So I think we're expecting pretty much any day now, you know, hopefully sooner than later, the latest unified agenda. Last September, they produced the spring 2025. So we're still waiting on the fall 2025 agenda here in 2026, the year of our Lord. And so, again, that should be forthcoming relatively soon. And so that will be, you know, hopefully our first real look at the full, you know, scope of deregulatory priorities going forward. Just this week, you know, there's been reports that EPA is staying busy. They're looking to put forward a rule that addresses mercury toxins in the air, repealing some of those protections that were placed by previous administrations. And so that's going to be another major deregulatory effort on their part coming up shortly. And so, so I think it's mostly just waiting to see what the agenda holds, and then that'll give us a better idea of, particularly they, I think, are going to include some, you know, broad framework of what their regulatory budget looks like for the coming, at least, sort of fiscal year, as it were.
Interesting. Well, we'll have to keep an eye on for the unified agenda and have you back on to talk about what was in it.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
Michael, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
So, yeah, you're becoming quite a serious regular at this point. Might have to bump you up on the Wikipedia page from recurring to regular.
Great.
Not sure if that's good or bad for you, but here we are. All right, so let's start with drug pricing. The administration wants to codify this most favored nation pricing and is urging the industry to negotiate now. They want to codify this into law. For listeners, what does most favored nation drug pricing mean, and what are the implications?
Sure. So this is, still a battle that we continue to fight. Most favored nation is pretty simple. It means we would pay in the United States what a peer nation would pay in for their patients at a drug pricing level. And that's where the simplicity ends, because codifying this means really baking in a lot of guardrails and putting a lot of specifics down on paper that we, at the moment, don't have. And one of the things that we most would need answered is, who are the countries that we want to consider peers, and what would good value be? And that's very difficult to pull together in a law that ostensibly would exist into perpetuity.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that seems like it would, the implications of this, it would just seem like it's more price controls, it's more, less innovation, it's more government hand putting its thumb on the wheel of, new drugs coming to market.
That's all correct. And one of the more important implications too is that we would be ceding every single ounce of pricing power that Americans traditionally enjoy. Those decisions will be made by foreign governments that have single-payer healthcare systems, have different populations, have different considerations, different definitions of value, and codifying that into the U.S. code seems short-sighted.
Yeah, to say the least. Given what we have, given that we have these agreements, why is the administration pushing for MFN to be codified into law?
They're pushing to codify it into law first and foremost because they want to lay claim to its existence to bring down the cost of drug prices in the United States. But one of the main reasons they're pushing for it now is because they view themselves as the most reasonable negotiators for this, to build on the voluntary agreements that companies have already come together with the administration. And that in and of itself is one of the causes for concern, in that we don't know what is in the agreements. And so it's hard to take seriously that this is the administration or this is the Congress that should be doing the negotiating in the first place.
Right. So what are the chances this actually comes into law?
Well, I think if nothing else, we've learned that things can move fast in the Thunderdome, but I would say that there is little chance of this truly happening. I think there are too many unanswered questions about what it would need to entail that Congress, I don't think, could pull it together in legislative text.
Yeah, I had a feeling that just based off of knowing how well Congress moves these in an election year,
yes,
that it was a very low chance of success. But it's still something that we have to keep an eye on, and because it's important, because these ideas continue to crop up from time to time, and you have to bat them down when they come up.
Exactly. This continues to be a priority, and so for the administration, and so it will be a priority for us.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the Medicare Advantage enrollment. New data showed that MA enrollment is still growing, but at a much slower pace. What's driving this shift, and what does it mean for the beneficiaries?
Another perennial topic, Medicare Advantage. To put a finer point on the stability. Yes, the growth rate itself has slowed, although the growth rate is just over 3% for data as of February 1st. And what we see when you look at the plan data that reports the number of beneficiaries enrolled is that while there is growth in the market itself, there has been a lot of plan resorting, meaning that patients and beneficiaries are switching from one company to another, sometimes from national to regional or regional to national. And that in and of itself is noteworthy as we continue to discuss potential improvements to the Medicare Advantage program, and only highlights the importance of taking those reforms seriously because, again, although it is leveling off, the program itself is still growing and has over 35 million members across the country.
So yeah, what does this tell us about Medicare Advantage? Where Medicare Advantage is headed? Are we seeing a pause? Are we seeing a pause in growth or a fundamental reset?
We're seeing some level of evening out. Reset is probably the direction we want to go, although probably not necessarily fundamental. But one of the things that's most important is that with the plan resorting, these reforms should no longer be targeted at the large major insurers that often catch the ire of elected officials and patients alike. But there is needs to be more focus on plan design, on plan availability. It's not just national companies that are insuring individuals. It's smaller regional plans, which is great for the patients and the beneficiaries themselves, but really indicates that we need to think about how to continue to protect the Medicare Advantage program, which is still growing and is the predominant form of Medicare that people have. It is larger in enrollment than traditional Medicare, but at the same time acknowledging that a lot of the reforms that have been talked about in the past maybe need to be revisited as the types of companies and the types of plans that people are enrolled in shift.
Interesting. Well, Michael, thanks for coming on and breaking that down. We've had a jam-packed podcast today where covered all sorts of topics and ones we didn't expect to cover today, but here we are. So thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.